Well, welcome back. It is still VOP this morning, right here on Voice of the People TV. And we definitely want to dive into second conversation. Well, the Senate and the National Council for Women's Society are advocating for the inclusion of domestic workers in the proposed 70,000 naira national minimum wage scheme. The thing that comes to my head is, I want to work. Anyways, this push emerged during a public hearing on a bill for the domestication and registration of domestic workers and their employers. Sponsored by Senator Babangida Hussaini, Senator Sita Izunaso emphasized that domestic workers like housemaids should be covered by the proposed minimum wage. The bill's focus will shift from domestication to registration and protection of domestic workers. Well, the NCWS and the Ministry of Labor and Employment expressed support for the bill. And of course, still in the studio, we have with us Mr. Segun Shokwiton, who of course is the Chairman, Accountability Conduct and Transparency Network, and Mr. Chukuma Okoro joining us virtually. He is a journalist and a public affairs analyst. I'm going to come straight to the studio. Mr. Segun, all of this, what does this imply, basically, as it stands?
It's an interesting bill. First of all, I think that the people that are moving this bill don't even understand what they're talking about. And from the little I've seen of the bill, it doesn't even address the issues that need to be addressed for this to happen. In the first instance, what is the size of this domestic workforce? Who are they? Where are they? You want to register them. How will you do that? Is it technology you're going to use? What's the instrumentality or what's the process that will be used to achieve this registration? For the information of these legislators that are moving this, domestic workers are a part of the informal sector in this country. Yeah. And the informal sector, just rough estimates by experts, has been put at about 60 to 65% of total economic activity in the country. If you look at the standard across the world, or the average across the world, the World Bank says that the informal sector represents roughly about 35% of the workforce globally. And the percentage shifts higher in developing and underdeveloped countries and shifts lower in the more developed ones. So, for example, in the United States of America, the percentage is put somewhere around between 3 to 5% of the total workforce is in the informal sector, which means everybody else is accounted for. What's the informal sector? Just workers and businesses that are not captured by formal structures and systems of government. Right. So taxation, issues around minimum wage, levies and tariffs and all of that don't apply to them because you don't know who they are. They're not registered. So it's not a bad idea to say you want to register them. But I think there's a far bigger problem of the entire economy operating in the shadows. So before you solve the domestic, why are they concerned about domestic workers being on minimum wage when the government cannot tax the vulcanizer and cannot tax the hairdresser or the barber, or the market woman? I think those are the more critical issues. And if you solve those issues, then you have a database of your workforce and your business people, and it's then easier to integrate them into structures like this. That's one. The other issue with this is before you legislate minimum wage for private operators in an economy, you must provide the enabling environment that will ensure that those operators are making enough returns on their investment or on their activities to be able to afford the minimum wage. So in other countries where you have a national minimum wage that compels people not to pay lower than that, it's a crime to pay lower than the national minimum wage in organized societies. In such societies, the basic and fundamental requirements of successful business are provided by government. So you would have power infrastructure, road infrastructure, healthcare, education, and all of those things. They run smoothly, such that as a business, you have the wherewithal, you have all that you need to do well, and therefore can afford to pay the minimum wage. In Nigeria, it's not that way. Everybody does everything for themselves. And then you want to legislate that I should pay my house help 70,000 naira.
It's quite interesting.
Where is it going to come from?
It's really quite interesting because looking at it from the fact that as it stands, inflation is at a high rate. Absolutely. And then you want to compel families and individuals to start paying their housemaid this level. I mean, you spoke about data. Maybe you help us understand this. Do you really think that even if this bill dare to see the light of the day, would there be any lacuna between the people and, of course, the legislators who are practically looking at bills that are not feasible?
Look, I mean, it's interesting that I think is this Senator Izuna So?
Yes.
Actually said it. This bill is unenforceable. You know, they can pass it to law all they want. Nothing is going to happen. Nobody, I mean, you cannot squeeze water out of a rock unless you are Moses. Moses. You cannot squeeze water out of a rock. You know, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
If they pass this law, it will not work. Because, you know, drivers on the average right now earn about 40,000 for very low paid one, maybe 50,000 for the average. And then if you work in a corporate organization, maybe 80,000.
I'm going to...
House help, David. House helps roughly earn about between 30 to 40,000 now, roughly. And there are the ones that earn about 10, 20,000, depending on other conditions that go with it. If you live in the house with the people that you are supporting, then you get paid less. How do you want to move those figures to 70,000 and above? Where will the money come from? Until the government deals with that question of where the resources will come from, then this law will fail.
All right, let's get Chukwuma Okoro's thoughts on this one as well. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Moses, it's quite interesting. I just laughed when I read the motion moved by the senator and the NCW, National Council of Women's Society in Nigeria. You know, what actually struck me is that it's a good development because a journey of 1,000 kilometers starts with a step. You know, unfortunately, the two parties are trying to go to the front from behind. You know, you are 50 in a line, and instead of starting from number 1, you actually go and start from number 48 or 49. You know, it doesn't work. Life works on sequences, you know, like in project management. There is what we call sequence. You know, you build something on top of something in a sequential manner. The moment you miss a loop, you cause problem in the system. That is exactly what they are trying to do. You know, and it brings me to why house helps? Why did they just pick out house helps?
Don't you think that the inhuman treatment some households have subjected their house helps or their aides to actually happen to be the reason some people are beginning to talk? We've seen some videos and pictures of how people are even indulging in child labor. They will go to a particular place where maybe there's no formal education and pull people, young children, to, you know, a more developed state, promising them education and other things that they know these children will actually need. But when they get to their madam's place in court, reverse will be the case. Don't you think that this actually should be the reason the National Assembly are beginning to look into it?
Fina, I would like you to establish the link between how much they pay, how much they ought to be paid, and the social infraction on their lives. Is there any guarantee that if you start paying house helps 100,000 or 150,000 naira, that they will not be maltreated by?
Some households could not even afford to have one house help, but they end up having like 2 or 3. When we have this minimum wage now to be paid 70,000 least to some people, don't you also think that will actually deter some people from gathering more than they can chew?
No, let's establish one thing first. The fact that you pay your house help 70,000 naira, does it guarantee the fact that you will not maltreat her? Don't
you think that when they have an organization, they can actually run back to that particular group to talk or to lay complaint? Because they are yet to, they say they will form a team, they will form an organization that will help to champion this cause.
Fina, it's a social issue and not a financial one.
Right.
How do you relate with that engages a contractor and says, okay, these contractors, we are going to pay you for cleaning the banking hall. We are going to pay you 20,000 naira. And the contractor collects 120,000 naira from the bank. And the person works from 8 in the morning, from 7 in the morning to 5 in the evening when the bank shuts down. How do you relate to that? Is that human or inhuman? So the whole conversation, what I think is happening, the whole conversation is going to lead us to one thing. Like I said, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. Gradually, we are going to transit to hourly rates so that what actually we call minimum wage, which is actually salary wage in the true sense of the word, will be calibrated on hourly basis. Because for now, what we don't earn wages, we earn salaries. And the factory workers that earn wages, so to say, are not even factored into the negotiations when the NLC and when the LTUC go to the negotiation table with the government. What they factor in is salary, grade level salaries 4 to 12, 4 to 15 of government workers. You know, so I'm happy that we are holding this conversation. What is going to happen with time is that Nigeria will start looking at how to transit from salaries to wages. That is what is going to happen.
I'm happy you made mention of this, Mr. Chukuma, because we've actually had this conversation about, is it minimum wage we're going to be talking about, or is it the salary that we're supposed to be talking about? But as the case may be, we know that in other clime, you know, we have the caregivers, and for you to be a caregiver is a professional job, and they actually pay them well. Most Nigerians that japa to other, you know, countries, some of them also do caregiving job, and they are being paid per hour. Now, but when you bring it down to Nigeria, you just suppose it's here in this country, Nigeria, no one even has anything called, there's nothing like caregiving. We call them maid. We even use some derogatory word while addressing the people who we have as helps and aides and all that at home. And we don't even have any amount of money, you know, spelled out to pay them. So don't you actually think that this is more like a call for us to get to that direction whereby they will come and be under one umbrella and their needs will be actually be taken care of uniformly?
Fina, the word caregiver is nebulous. It's open to interpretations. In some places, caregivers are actually medical personnel that take care of, that work under nurses in hospitals. In fact, in some places, nurses are called nurses, physiotherapists, and a whole lot of people that work in the health sector are called caregivers. And I keep going back to the fact that this thing is a social issue, it's not a financial one. I'm not able to establish the fact that if you pay me 500, that if I become a maid in the Dangote family and they pay me 500,000 naira, I'm not sure. It doesn't take away the fact that one of his children or the wives or his wife will not maltreat me because they pay me 500,000 naira.
Right.
So it's more like a social issue. And I expect the people that are making this call to redirect their attention to ensuring that maids, house helps, caregivers, whatever name we give them, are not maltreated by the people that employ them. Okay. It has nothing to do, it has less to do with how much they are being paid. Because if you talk about how much caregivers, maids are being paid, will you for any reason understand why a teacher in a primary school is paid less than 40,000 naira, public or private? How do you explain that? So it's an ongoing conversation. As they have brought out that issue, we'll begin to tweak it to the point that we get at a point where everybody is on the same page. It's a working process. It's going to take a little while. But like I said, I'm happy that they have broached the issue. It will probably lead us to more important things, not even the direction they are going. The conversation will center around, like I said, transiting from salaries to wages, so that if you have a maid and you have an agreement with the wage that you are going to pay her 2,000 naira per hour, the person can elect to work for 2-3 hours, walk away, go and work elsewhere.
Okay. You just, I like the fact that you mentioned that it's going to transit into another conversation, and which, of course, some quarters have been saying that it looks more like the National Assembly seem not to want to start hitting the right button. Now, I'm going to come to you, Mr. Shegun. At this point, you did mention earlier that the formal and informal labor workforce in Nigeria are not being accounted for, like the data is not visibly there. And also, we do understand that the National Assembly has said at the beginning of the year that there was no budget or any plan for anything called census. And right now, Nigeria does not have a credible figure that we would fall back to say this is our amount of workforce and these are the ones that are not working. What do you say to this conversation, owing to the fact that as it stands, if this bill is passed into law, there might be some level of issues as regarding this set of people that are tagged as the informal labor workers in Nigeria as against the formal labor workers?
Yeah, so look, our Senate, our legislators, I don't know. Again, because you're on air, you want to be careful with your words. I almost feel like they really don't understand why they exist. They don't know what their actual objective, the objectives of having a legislature in a country, what it's all about. So what they tend to do is they are very random and haphazard in terms of the legislation that comes out from there. Somebody will just have a dream in the night and wake up on the wrong side of his bed and come up with a bill to say it's wrong to sleep on the left side of the bed. You know, it's ridiculous. This issue that they are addressing is a very small fragment of a bigger problem. And I would have thought that what should be happening is maybe you need to have a sit down as legislators who are responsible for creating the legislative framework for development in a country, with the executive who are responsible for operationalizing those things and implementing the laws and the policies to achieve the common good for the country. I would have expected that they should sit down together, identify the issues around the entire workforce. So the Minister of Labor and Productivity, are they even incorporated in this conversation at all? This conversation has already gotten to public hearing stage. I didn't read anything there that spoke about the input from the Ministry of Labor and Productivity, you know, and these people fall directly under the purview of that ministry. So can't we have a conversation around the entirety of the workforce, domestic workers being one of them? Talk about how much they are paid and their conditions of service. You know, two different things. Okay. Talk about that holistically. Talk about other segments of the workforce in Nigeria. How do we unlock the potential in this large workforce that we have? Because it's a resource. So what can we do to ensure that all of these people are producing to their full potential while the country earns, as a result, better productivity and GDP, and then they can earn a reasonable minimum wage as a result, or a reasonable living wage as a result? How do we put all of these conversations together, and what legislation do we need to put in place to ensure that this happens? You know, this is so random that you begin to wonder why. Why domestic servants? Why should the Senate, the entirety of a Senate that gets paid 20 million per month per senator, 109 of them, and then they come up with a bill that wants to talk about domestic workers?
You think this is more like a diversion of interest so that Nigerians will look to a different direction?
It's a lack of focus. I don't think they are being deliberate about this. I think you are crediting them with too much purposefulness if this is diversionary. I think it's just a complete lack of focus and understanding of purpose.
All right, then, as we make to wrap up now, let's talk about the conversation on wage system as it truly what it really means. Do you think Nigeria is ripe? How soon do you think Nigeria can transit to the hourly wage system? Because our virtual guest pointed to the fact that this conversation might lead to that transition to the wage system. Let's not forget that factory workers, construction workers, they are paid wages, but not hourly. It's daily.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you react?
So the challenge with that is data. And, you know, as a country, we are not given to relating with issues based on evidence, facts, and data. So even organizations tend, you know, especially organizations in the semi-formal sector. So you've got the organized private sector. These are large organizations. They've got proper structures. They can document. In fact, they use biometric systems to capture your work hours and all of that. Once you go below that level and you start talking of the mid SMEs, and the SMEs employ the majority of the workforce in Nigeria. Once you go into that sector, will they have the wherewithal to capture the data required to implement an hourly wage system? I suspect the answer may be no. So there are structural issues that we need to fix with regards to how our economy runs. In fact, how our society works, how we as a people relate with events. We tend to be emotion-driven rather than fact and evidence-driven as a people. And that shows in all that we do. So I think we've still got some way to go to get to that point.
All right, then. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chukwuma, I wanted to come to you. So where we wrap up, right? Mr. Chukwuma, you're going to take your final thought, but then this I'm going to put across to you, and I'm going to ask this in a very simple sentence. How realistic is this bill, if passed, going to affect the ordinary Nigerian family that is not a part of the 70,000 naira minimum wage that have presently been passed by this government?
David, it's a very simple thing. Governors were unable to pay 30,000 naira. Nobody killed them. And now you're asking families that employ probably, okay, like if I use myself as an instance, just let me simulate a situation. I employ a house help, because my kids are in high school.
Right.
And you expect me to pay the person 70,000 naira. I will simply ask you, is my governor able to pay my sibling who works in the government or my cousin who works in the government 70,000 naira? You see, it's not about making laws. We have very fantastic laws. It's all about implementation. If the law passes, like I said, we had 30,000 naira. How many governors were able to pay? So it simply answers the question of how many families will be able to pay 70,000 naira. Now, I know that we are pressed with time. So let me just give my concluding thoughts.
Right.
My thought is this. To an extent, I share the sentiments expressed by Shegu to the extent that we don't have the informatics, we don't have the analytics, we don't have the data to run these things. But let me also point out that NIN worked. NIN is working. BVN is working. When Obasanjo rolled out the telephony in 2002, many Nigerians said Nigeria is too big, it's not going to work. It's working now, and our telephony rate became the fastest growing, not just in Africa, but globally. If the government puts its feet down to transit from salary to wages, trust me, it is going to work. We know why things don't work here. If we want it to work, it will work.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Chukwuma Okoro, a journalist and a public affairs commentator. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
A big
Enjoy
thanks.
the rest of your day.
You too. Well, big thanks also to Segun Shukwiton, who is Chairman, Accountability Council and Transparency Network. We appreciate you for your time and your thoughts.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
We'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll delve into other aspects of the show. Business, entertainment, and sports coming up shortly. Stay with us.